Welcome back to day 2 of the National Conference on Ending Homelessness and Capitol Hill Day. Please welcome to the stage the Chief Equity Officer of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Dr. Chandra Crawford.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Oh, talk up. It's time to start. Okay, everybody get seated. We're ready to roll. Day 2, welcome. So look, I hope this conference has been a good space for everyone in terms of learning, sharing, and building community so far. That's what we hope for, right? And so we've got an excellent plenary today. So I'm going to get us moving so that we can stay on time. So normally when I'm up here, I usually say a few words about our racial equity work, where we're going, what we've been up to, and how we like to shape the field. But today, I'm going to do a little something different. Today, what I want to talk about is what I've learned from you. So, and in having this discussion, I want to start with the late, great Lonnie Guinier and what she said about the canaries in the mine. And yes, I said canaries in the mine. I want you to stay with me for a second. So miners, when they went into the mine, they took canaries. And canaries, their respiratory system is sensitive. So they could feel the gas before humans could. So they could alert the miners to danger. The canaries' distress alerted the miners to get out the mine. So let me connect some dots of how this is related to us. So I came into this work because of Hurricane Katrina. I was horrified by what I saw. People who looked like me, who were abandoned and left in places like the Superdome to rot. So I said, if I find a job in New Orleans, that I would go there to help. That job was at the COC, Unity of Greater New Orleans. That's right. But before I could start, they told me I had to write an essay explaining my commitment to racial justice. See, they understood back then, this was during Katrina, right? They understood power structures, injustice, racism, and the interconnection between homelessness. And let me say this, we work with other advocacy groups across the South, and they had the same center. Those were our canaries in the mines. They alerted us through their distress about the dangers and the harm that we will do to people if we don't recognize racism. That's right. No. Of course, later on came the national push, right? To center and to recognize racism. But our canaries told us back then, but were we willing to listen? Are we willing to listen now? And it's the same with people with lived experience, right? What have we missed? What harm have we caused by not listening to the people closest to the crisis, our canaries in the mines, right? So today, I stand here humbled, and then deep reflection as one of the leaders of this organization about our cultural shift. I stand committed. And I also want to thank all of you. Like I said, this is about what we've learned from you. I want to thank you for all the teachable moments that you all have given to us. And I want you to know that we are now listening to the canaries in the mines. Thank you. So, I love my job because working with all of you all, but I get to introduce the most honorable representative, Congresswoman Cori Bush. And yes, look, I got my hug already. I was like, I'm sorry, I want to respect space, but I'm going for mine. There's just too much of an inspiration. And so I'm going to give a brief bio, but this is brief. Congresswoman Cori Bush is so inspirational. I didn't know where to start. So these are just snippets, okay? These are just snippets. And so one of the things that I want to point out is that Representative Cori Bush, she is a nurse, an activist, an organizer, single mother, ordained minister, and a representative in Congress for the 1st District of Missouri. All of that. And I mentioned 1st District. There are so many firsts behind Congresswoman Cori Bush's name, but I'm just going to name a few. The first Black woman and the first nurse to represent Missouri. That's just one of the, hey, there's a lot. The first activists involved in the lives of Black lives to be a member of Congress, to be elected to Congress. And I mentioned that because Congresswoman Cori Bush spent 400 days out there on the front lines of justice in Ferguson, and not only protesting and advocating. I remember I said something about being a nurse and an ordained minister, but helping people, right? Healing, because there were pellet guns, right? There was gas, and then also providing resources. But I also want you to know that Congresswoman Bush understands. Congresswoman Bush, she's been unhoused. She's faced eviction. She survived violence. Oh, she's had jobs that didn't pay a lot of money. And now she's taking her social justice to Congress. So I am glad, proud to have that type of powerful voice on the Hill working with us and speaking for vulnerable people. Let me bring out Congresswoman, the Honorable Congresswoman Cori Bush. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you all so much. I feel that love. So thank you, because I'm coming from the Hill. So thank you for tossing that love my way. Oh, geez. Let me start by saying thank you to Chief Policy Officer Steve Berg for greeting us outside and waiting in the heat for me to get ready in the car. And I still forgot my heels, and Dr. Chandra just showed me out in hers. So don't pay attention. If you're taking pictures, don't get my feet. And to our CEO, Anna Thank you so much for the welcome of being up here and greeting us backstage. And then to Dr. Crawford, thank you for that beautiful, 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 beautiful introduction. I feel like you memorized my life. But this is part of the work, recognizing the people that are actually doing work, which means also recognizing those who may not have a name, not in Congress, but are actually changing lives, one person, one family at a time. And that's the work that I would do before I ever entered Congress. And that's the work that you all are doing right now. And so I would just like to first say, please give yourselves a hand clap and then point that at somebody at your table. See, that's how it goes. That's it right there. Thank you to all of you, the dedicated and tenacious leaders at the National Alliance to End Homelessness for convening this deeply important conference. And we can tell how important it is. Look at how many people are here. And I was told there is a waiting list. You all, the ones that made it in. So I love the fact that you all have convened for this one common goal, this one goal in mind, achieving housing justice for all, and all means all. If you look it up in the dictionary, all just means all. And let me also say shout out to the Missouri folks in the house. Thank you all for allowing me the honor of addressing you, the nation's most courageous, some of the most courageous organizers and advocates and experts, you all who are tirelessly working to make housing for all a reality in our lifetime, not passing it on to the next generation, in our lifetime. The pandemic taught us many, many lifelong and transformative lessons that I plan to carry with me throughout my tenure in Congress, including the knowledge that the federal government can and should prevent evictions at any time. Like, why is that hard? You know, it baffles me because we say we are the, okay, let me stop. We tell, you know, what kind of country we are and how innovative and how smart we are. And then, but we can't fix this. We won't fix this. We learned that rental assistance programs and stimulus checks, child tax credits, student loan payment pauses, expanded SNAP, Medicaid, SSI, and unemployment benefits did not result in economic devastation, which is what we were told, but actual economic recovery. According to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, in December 2020, 6 months into the pandemic, nearly 9 million renters were behind on their rent. Over 2 million mortgages were delinquent. This nation was in crisis. That's why me and my colleagues, and probably some of you all that are out here in this audience, we were out there on those steps of the U.S. Capitol for 4 nights. For 4 nights and 5 days to make sure that our voices were heard and prevent more than 11 million people from being evicted during the pandemic. Because what do we have if we have nothing else? We can put our bodies on the line for other folks, and that's what we did to help save lives. And we know the housing crisis has not been averted for millions of renters. The $46 billion ERAP program saved countless lives, but we know that should be made permanent. Finally, make it permanent. A strong social safety net benefited each and every one of us during the pandemic, especially our Black and our brown families, people living with disabilities, our seniors, children, and the most vulnerable members of our communities. The need for housing is a universal human right. And it's disturbing. We have to beg for that. It's disturbing, it's heartbreaking, and my brain does not comprehend why we have to make sure that other humans see that. Humans. The access to housing, we know, is severely limited by one's income. There's a reason Black women suffer the highest forms of wage discrimination, and Black women renters get evicted at twice the rate of white renters. I myself, as we heard from Dr. Crawford, I've been evicted 3 times. Yeah, wow. And I tell my ish, like, people don't have to go dig in to talk to people. You don't have to call my community. I tell my ish because I know my ish, a lot of it comes from policy violence. And so I'm going to tell it so that we can change the policy so that we can eliminate the violence. They tell you, oh, don't know. You have to look and you have to sound and you have to bump that. People are hurting. People are dying. Don't look good, be good. Don't look good, do good. So when I think about the first time that I was evicted from my home, I was the victim of domestic assault. I was in a very violent relationship. And after one of the days when this person assaulted me, and I don't know if you all want to know this or not, but I fight back. Like, he ain't putting his hands on me and I'm not fighting, I'm fighting back. I'm not violent, but I wasn't going down without a fight. And that's in no way. But this person was able to make enough noise by the way that he was harming me and busted out windows and just destroyed the apartment. The noise was scaring the folks in the other units, which is understandable. And so the landlord evicted me and would not give me an opportunity to stay in the home, even though the other person wouldn't be there, just kicked me out. I left that apartment with my things in trash bags and wondering where I would go. When I became a member of Congress, I immediately introduced an amendment in the Violence Against Women Act to provide emergency housing services to victims of domestic assault. I had to become the legislator I so desperately needed when I became evicted and housing insecure, because the other part of that type of an eviction is, how do you tell people? How do you go find that family member? I need a place to go because he beat me and they put me out. I recall another time when I was evicted, not because I couldn't pay the rent, even though I was struggling. Oh, absolutely, I was struggling, but I managed every month to get that rent in. But I wasn't evicted because of the rent. I was evicted because I was a Ferguson activist. And the lawyer representing the management company told me that they didn't want me as a tenant anymore because neighbors were saying that they were afraid that I would bring the protests to their homes. I was at the mercy of unscrupulous landlords who prioritize profit over human life every single day. The housing crisis, we know, is a racial justice issue. It's a labor rights issue, and it's a public health issue. universal housing, universal vouchers, and a permanent federal rental assistance program. Those are all tangible steps that can be taken right now, to solve this crisis. We also have to be concerned about the quality of housing, not just putting folks in housing, saying we have the numbers. We got the numbers, we got units. But what about quality housing? Our folks deserve dignity. So quality housing, particularly for our folks who have these vouchers and our public housing tenants. I think about in St. Louis, where I've seen and experienced firsthand that when low-income renters finally find an affordable unit, pass the often discriminatory application process and pay these enormous deposits. Man, do I remember that, and we're still dealing with that. It didn't change because my name is Cori Bush and I'm in Congress. No, now they try to charge more. It's like she has $1 million. Don't look at Google. But folks are met with these substandard housing conditions: black mold, roaches, mice, rats, poisoning, asbestos. Hardworking people are getting sick every day. And folks that might not work hard. Some folks that don't work. Hey. When you say all, we mean all. So whether you work hard, whether you don't work hard, whether you don't work, are still getting sick every day for the crime of not having enough money for a better apartment. Our seniors, our immigrants, people who are re-entering from the criminal legal system, women with children, our LGBTQ plus community, and millions of low-income workers and other folks are subject to horrors that we can't imagine. Let's go to workers. If a worker gets sick and loses their job, or a tenant outright refuses to pay for substandard housing conditions, we know what happens. I'm preaching to the congregation. They are mercilessly threatened with eviction, or they're just thrown out on the street. Don't go to the news and tell on me. This is the reality that low-income renters face every single day, but this is why we fight. This is why we show up every single day. This is why we convene, so that we can get more strength, we can get more knowledge, so we can be around the folks that we need to be around to help build us up and help undergird us, so that when we leave out of here, we can go back and do this again for another year. The direct relationship between poverty and homelessness has been established by research and policy initiatives. We know for decades. We know that low-income renters face increasingly high rents and rising housing instability without the support provided from the pandemic era benefit programs. And we know the National Low-Income Housing Coalition reports. We know that report. From 2009 to 2021, the median rent across the U.S. increased dramatically from $817 a month to nearly $1,200. At the same time, federal minimum wage has remained stagnant at an abysmal $7.25 for 14 years and counting. That means that there is not a single state or county where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom unit. A worker making the federal minimum wage can barely afford a home, let alone the transportation needed, let alone medical care, clothes, and education. The housing crisis is but a small, though, microcosm of the larger economic system that punishes folks for being poor, that saddles our 18-year-old students with thousands of dollars in student debt. And And we have folks saying, no, we can't cancel student debt, but we can give me money for my PPP loans. Let me allow me to not have to pay back my PPP loans. And they say that they're representatives of people. So, but also ensnares patients in this labyrinth of hospital debt and evicts families from their homes. This is a violence, unforgiving economic system. It's so violent, it's so unforgiving that it blames the victims of poverty for their circumstances without offering relief that we know is actually there and possible. So that's why we need organizations like you, like the National Alliance to End Homelessness, like the National Coalition for the Homeless, like the National Low Income Housing Coalition, who all of you vehemently defend access to housing by bolstering these federal investments in housing and service, these programs and services. And we can't thank you enough. Coming straight from the Hill, folks like me that believe like I believe, not all the Hill, but folks, not all of Congress. But we thank you. Because as we look at fiscal year 2024 and how it's shaping up to be this historic turning point in the fight for housing justice, a potential 20 to 25% reduction in federal investments for housing services and programs in the fiscal year 2024, we know that will be devastating for our communities, regardless of if you are red or blue. We don't have enough as it is, and they want to cut the bit that we do have. To effectively recover from the pandemic, we have an obligation to bolster support for wraparound services like substance use programs and mental health services and employment assistance that sustain people as they transition into permanent housing. We can't cause harm, and that is what continues to happen. But with folks like you, you're not just helping that individual who called. You're not just helping out that family that needed your help. And some of you are working day and night and going into dangerous areas on the streets, not just helping that person. When you help one person, you help families, which means you help their legacy, you help generations. But when you help that one person, you help that family, you help that community, because a person builds a family that builds a community. When you help that community, you help that town, you help that city, you help that state. So what you're actually doing is you're affecting our country and our world. So as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Homelessness, and I affirm my commitment to defending homeless services and programs until we win. There is no room for us to quit. There is no room to turn back. There's no place for it. We can't turn back. We can't stop, because every single moment somebody needs housing. And it makes me emotional because people die when we don't help. So that's why I'm proud to announce the reintroduction of the Unhoused Bill of Rights, which challenges the federal government This bill will challenge the federal government to permanently end and prevent the housing crisis, which it should have done long ago. The $20 billion it will cost to provide housing to every single person in this country is less than 2% of the nearly $900 billion defense budget that it is likely to pass later this year. Less than 2%. That's why this NAEH Capitol Hill Day, I implore our advocates, which I know you'll do because you do this, this is your thing, flood our congressional offices, not mine, but flood. Don't waste your time on me, like we got y'all. But flood those offices and challenge them on their budget priorities. Ask about the budget and their commitment to ending the unhoused crisis in their respective districts. The calls, you all, the emails, those vote recommendations and advocacy meetings, they all add up to the larger fight for human justice that has endured for decades, and it will continue to endure. That's why we do this work. And when they hear from you, when we keep pressing and pushing in, when we won't let them turn us away, when we let them know what this is doing to humans and what this does to families, when we make sure that they understand that we won't turn back and you can't silence us because we're doing the work of people. We're doing the work that they should have done already and should be doing now. When we do that, they can't ignore you, and that helps give us the few of us that are standing right with you, the few of us that are standing up for you, the few of us that care deeply as you. It gives us the fuel and the fight to keep going in the face of their hatred and crap. And so, thank you all again. Thank you to the National Alliance to End Homelessness for all of your extraordinary leadership. And I'm going to look from one end of the room to the other, because every single one of you is who I'm talking to. And not only that, to the 1,000 folks who are on the waiting list, talking to you too. Thank you for your extraordinary leadership, and to all of our advocates, those of you who are listening, for your continued resiliency. I know that it is not easy. I know that it is hard fought. I know that it is thankless. I know that you go to sleep at night, many of you saying, I didn't get to finish. I didn't help that one. We didn't finish that. It's not done. This person is still on the street. This family is still, we didn't get them into permanent housing, or it didn't work out when we got, I know that it's still always there. But you are changing lives right now. I look forward to seeing you all on the battlefield, otherwise known as Capitol Hill. Go get them. Thank you. And always remember, your Congresswoman loves you. Thank you. Love you all.
Thank you, Representative, for those remarks. Please welcome to the stage the Alliance's Senior Director of Communications, Tom Murphy.
How do I follow that? Oh, good morning. I believe it's still morning. I am so honored to bring to the stage our next speakers because they'll be discussing one of the greatest challenges facing our mission to end homelessness today. How do we take back the narrative? Because we know that narratives inform the public's attitudes and our lawmakers' policies on homelessness. Policies that can be positive or negative, just or unjust, truthful or dishonest. So this is why, as Ann mentioned yesterday, that we are proud to be in partnership with the Case Made to launch Building the Public Will for Ending Homelessness and Creating Communities Rich with Abundant Housing, a case-making playbook for leaders everywhere. We encourage everyone to take advantage of the playbook, which can be downloaded at endhomelessness.org/playbook. And this is a good pivot to our next speakers, who are each doing some of the most important work on narrative change around homelessness in our nation, though in different ways. Marisol Bello is the executive director of the Housing Narrative Lab. She has spent her career championing the stories and voices of people with lived experience so that they can lead in creating the solutions that help every family thrive. First, she served as a career journalist. And in fact, I first met Marisol many years ago when she was actually speaking at an Alliance conference as part of a Meet the Media panel when she was at USA Today. And more recently in the nonprofit world, where she led narrative strategies to change hearts and minds about those living on the brink and to move people into action. Marisol will be leading a discussion with author Stephanie Land. Land's instant New York Times bestseller, Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive, the basis for the hit Netflix series of the same name, recounts her harrowing saga as a single mom navigating the bureaucratic nightmare of living below the poverty line. President Obama named Made to his 2019 summer reading list, noting its unflinching look at America's class divide, a description of the tightrope many families walk just to get by, and a reminder of the dignity of all work. A raw and inspiring exploration of a mother's resilience, the Emmy-nominated Netflix original series Made has reached more than 67 million households, making it one of Netflix's most watched limited series ever. In November, Land will publish her second memoir, Class, which picks up where Made left off as she faces the new challenges of being a poor college student and a single parent. Her writing about economic and social justice, domestic abuse, chronic illness, and motherhood has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the New York Review of Books, the Atlantic, and many, many other outlets. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Marisol Bello and Stephanie Land.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am so excited. So y'all need to know that Stephanie and I have known each other for quite some time. And this is the first time that I get to share a stage with my friends. So I'm so excited by it. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm in preparation for this. I'm like, well, it's just going to be like, we're going to have any normal conversation, right? Just with an audience.
A big audience.
Big audience. Yeah.
I love it. Well, how about we just we jump in? So Stephanie, we've known each other for quite some time, and we've talked a lot about storytelling and writing and books. So I want to jump in with your memoirs, like from the get-go. So the first one was really, for those of you that are probably familiar, Stephanie wrote a memoir called Made that has since also been turned into a Netflix series. And I know that in that series, or when you were writing that memoir, that was really one of like, you need to write the story about struggling to get by and what that looks like. And then for your second book, Class, which is coming out in November, so make sure that you put that on your list. So for the second book, Class, you kind of were given a little bit more free rein to write the story that you wanted to write. So can you tell us a little bit about that story and why you chose? Like, what was the story burning in your heart?
Well, I had an essay go very viral that was about cleaning houses, and an agent reached out to me and he said, are you working on a book? And I kind of lied to him and said that I was. And so the book that I proposed writing was very different than a story about a person who cleans houses, because to me, that my story was the fact that I got out of a domestic violence relationship. I moved away and I went to college and I graduated from college. That was, to me, the most important part of my story. That was the hardest part. That was what, that's what I am most proud of. And so when I was given the freedom, finally, to write about what I really wanted to write about, that was the story that I definitely wanted to do.
Let's tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, it's so the book itself. So the book takes place, it's my senior year of college. It starts out with me starting my final year of college, and my daughter starts her first year of kindergarten. And what I really wanted to show in this book was how many barriers and obstacles there are in place for low-income people to achieve an education in higher education, especially poor parents. And I also wanted to show a lot of parallels between my experience and my daughter's experience as the child of a single mom who couldn't volunteer in class, who, couldn't be there for PTA meetings. And I was always worried that I would be seen as uncaring and neglectful. And my kid was kind of treated in a way that I'll just say my younger daughter was not treated in kindergarten when we were in a more privileged place. And so I set out to write this book about, how hard it is to be a college student in these circumstances. But I also wanted to show that it starts off hard for a lot of students.
So one of the things that we've talked so much about the deep narrative of bootstraps and the deep narrative of deservedness. And one of the things that struck me especially about this second book, we've talked a little bit about this, is that the first book was very much about like, this is what it means to struggle to get by. These are the challenges, these are the experiences, and I'm going to walk you through that life. And you do that in the second book. But what's really nuanced, I thought, about the second book is that you take that narrative and you challenge it, the narrative of who is deserving. Right? Like that, the narrative of who gets to have all the things. So I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more about that and look at how that gets shaped in the second book, and talk a little bit about that narrative and the implications of that narrative, what that narrative means. Because I think everyone in this room knows that from all of the work that we're doing, and it gets in the way of so much. So what can we learn about how we can start to attack it, dismantle it, blow it up? Because that book does that.
I think with my first book, I had to recognize that I'm a privileged person writing this story. But in my first book, I was also very apologetically offering this tale that I very much knew needed to be I actually knew it needed to be marketable and an acceptable poor person story. And so I tried my hardest to do that. And I really tried to write it, I think, in I'm looking back on this, I wrote it, how long have we known each other? Almost 10 years. I was working on the book when I met her. But it felt very apologetic to me. Like, I'm so sorry, I'm telling this story. But, this is my experience. It was kind of like an Oliver Twist type of telling, because that is the deserving poor, or that has kind of been grilled into me as what the deserving poor
That's
is.
the narrative.
And so with this book, I have more some clout, I guess. Like I have the Netflix series, I have bestseller, I have the thumbs up from Obama. So I was like, I can be a little angry And I can give a big middle finger to this system that I had to fight against for 10 years in order to feed my kid, to shelter, to get a degree in higher education, which to many people is just an extension of high school. But for me, it was $50,000 in debt and years of struggle. And so I came into this book wanting to be angry. And at the time, I was not allowed to be angry. There's a line in the book that says, I didn't have the privilege to feel, but I can now. So I tried very much to do that.
I'm curious, this like a sort of side note, but I'm curious what you saw as a thing that changed. Was it the success from the first book to the second book that then allowed you to say, I'm not going to apologize because of the system that I was working through and having to deal with, versus the second book, which is much more about like, who gets to have an education? Who gets to eat? Who gets to choose what happens with their bodies and having children and all of it? Like, where, I'm curious if you had like a light, what was the light switch moment, right? Around like you were feeding the narrative in the first book, and in the second book, you were like, nah, I'm out.
I think my circumstance changed very drastically. I wrote the first book. I was still living in low income housing. I was still very much under the impression that, and I still talk about this a lot with my therapist, that my value as a human being was only the amount of physical work that I could put out into the collective, be a contributing member of society. And so that was a lot that I needed to work on to overcome, because when you're told for so many years that you have to work 20 hours a week in order to eat, and the amount of money that you get to eat, I mean, and then at one point I couldn't work 20 hours a week, and I no longer received that money to eat. And that really fundamentally affected me. And I didn't know how much really until I started writing this book. And I really wanted to challenge this narrative that we have toward underprivileged population and marginalized populations of this resilience and this resilience training. And so for me, it was really just showing how ridiculous it is to tell someone that they're resilient without recognizing the systematic structures that are forcing them to be that way.
Yeah, I think that's so, we've talked a lot and we've talked so much about that. So you just mentioned something earlier about some of the privilege that you get that you walk through and that you walk with, and, you're white. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, right? Because, how your story is going to be, how you get to tell your story and how your story is going to be heard is going to be different than other people. And there are a lot of people of color, especially women of color, that will see their own story through yours as well. But you get more platform. You've gotten platform. So can we talk a little bit about that and what the impact of all of that is? And then I want to jump into how we can make some space, right, for more people of color and more people to be able to tell their stories.
So my day job has become, I'm a public speaker, which if you had ever asked me what's the job that you will definitely not do, I would have said speaking to audiences. I am a very shy, introverted person in real life. And so usually, I get up on stage and I give a keynote, and I come right out of the gate saying it probably doesn't get me a repeat job. I come out of the gate saying, like, I am standing on this stage because I'm a white person and because I am described with words like educated and resilient and inspirational. And I point out that, you know, the success stories are the stories that as a population, we listen to. We love the rags to riches stories, and we love listening to people who have been through it, who are able to very eloquently retell their tale and in a way that's kind of digestible, that doesn't offend people. When I am traveling a lot for public speaking gigs, I joke with people that it's my goal to make at least one white male uncomfortable every day. I mean, that goes as far as like taking the armrest on an airplane. But you know, that is my goal, is to stand up there and challenge white people to recognize their privilege, recognize their racism, and recognize why they are fangirling me and point out that it's because I look like you. And so that has, you know, just throughout all of this public speaking and how that challenges my mental health, that has become my purpose. And so that is kind of what gets me up in the morning and packs my suitcase, is that I have the opportunity to speak to a large audience and put them in their place and make them uncomfortable.
Has there been a moment where that's happened, where there's been a like aha in the audience, or someone's come to you and be like, oh yeah, we kind of do that, or we're doing this a lot more than we, you know?
I'm trying to think. One, there's so many. I think, you know, organizers will say something like, because normally I speak to funders. They are holding a luncheon as a fundraiser for their organization, and they bring me on stage. Sometimes it feels like they're cueing a video to make people donate to their organization, which is good. It's great. And a lot of organizers will make comments like, boy, they really needed to hear that. But one guy, he was really moved by my keynote, and he said, you know, next time, how about if we put everybody in buses and give them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drive them around town where there's like a bunch of like underprivileged people living there. And I just looked at him and I was like, so there's a thing called poverty porn, and like, don't do that. Don't do that. If you want to do something like that, why don't you invite the people who live in those neighborhoods and bring them here and feed them a nice lunch and then bring them on stage? He was not receptive.
Well, talking a little bit about that, how do we make space? I mean, how, you know, what is our role here in this room? What are the ways that, you know, as we are all thinking, all right, as a housing and as a homelessness movement, we're recognizing how we need to bring people of color both into the space and people with lived experience into the space. How do we make space for them in real ways?
I think, well, first, you know, I'll talk more about it, the how powerful a first person narrative can be, but anybody can make space. We are all on social media. I'm assuming most of us are. You can make space by sharing articles. You can talk about poverty, just saying the word poverty and saying the word homeless people, just and having that conversation to in your day-to-day life, but especially sharing the stories of others with first person experience. You have a lot of ability to make space for that. Anybody does. But I think as an organization, you can make a lot of space through just art and expressive art and murals, first person stories. Kids can write down their experience in ideally a very non-exploitive way, but there are a lot of ways for self-expression that you can physically make space for and you can lift up. And I think the more people who share their stories in a very in your face type of way that is not toned down so that it's not like offensive to people because they don't want to know about how difficult people's lives are. You can say it in a way that is very blatant and raw and say, this is what my life is like. And I would love to see more space created for that. I think a lot of times there's a lot of messaging that goes on with, instead of saying it one way, like, well, no, this will be heard better if you say it this way. And I would really challenge people to stop doing that. And so I think the more we allow space for people to be expressive and to be angry, the more normal that will be, and they will be heard.
I love that. And we actually have talked a lot about that tension, right? Between sort of the messaging and how some people will hear things and also who the messenger is, right? Around that. And you were talking a little bit about that, right? Sort of like in the second book, you needed to be and show that you were angry. And in the first one, it was a little bit different. And I'm, one of the things that I'm thinking about is how, what is the role of organizations? Because we are with an audience of people that work for government, that work for nonprofits, that are advocates, that are service providers, and also people with lived experience. So I kind of have two kind of pieces that I want to dig into a little bit about that. One is as it relates to the organizations themselves. So many people are thinking about understanding how important it is for us to lift the voices of people with lived experience, but still trying to figure that out with a long history of transaction, right? And you and I met, the way that you and I met was through a very specific program that we shaped that I shaped at a national organization that was all about people with lived experience. And so I'd love to talk and dig into a little bit about how organizations can do this work, right? Like what is their role in coaching and doing all of the things so that you're not putting words in people's mouths, but also coaching them and providing the leadership that they can then pick up the mantle and like lead with their stories.
Marisol is being very humble. What she did was she started a writing fellowship within an organization called Community Change. And I'm trying to say this without getting emotional. So I met Marisol right after this huge essay had gone viral, and all of a sudden, like my career as a freelance writer was taking off. And what she offered me was mentorship, but also validation and visibility. I can definitely say I would not be where I am today without her role in my life. And it is because she took such an interest in me personally and what my story was. And not only gave me space for that, like we used to have calls every Monday that would it was supposed to be just like a check-in on what I was working on, but we talked for like 2 hours and it was just her kind of asking me questions like she is right now, but just pointing out that my lived experience is not only valuable and important, but it's also not what other people are experiencing. I didn't know that. When you are hungry, you have a very focused way of looking at the world, because you are very focused on getting to the next meal and getting through the day. And for me, I suddenly realized that I see the world in a different filter, through a different filter. And it is my job to not only show people that filter exists, but to bring them through it so that they can experience what it's like. And I think through a lot of coaxing and mentorship, I'm a creative writer. I'm not necessarily a journalist, and I had to learn like what the lead is. There's another sentence that's really important. The net graph. Yes. And so I had to learn not only how to write an op-ed basically, but also that my story matters. And I think, there's a lot that you can do there with people that through your organization who have lived experience, and just to show them and give them the same empowerment and confidence to be able to talk about their life and what they experience.
That coaching and mentoring piece, particularly the coaching and support piece, just seem really critical for organizations to be thinking about as they are thinking about how to do this work and lift up the people with lived experience in their circles and in their orbits and that they're working with, right? But in ways that are not like, hey, I got a reporter that needs to talk with a woman between the ages of 30 and 35 who has one boy between, the ages of 9 and 10 and a girl who is 2 years old, right? I mean, like just so transactional, right? But a lot of the work is really about creating that relationship so it becomes teamwork.
Yeah. And creating art, writing, making space for that in your personal life is so unaffordable. It is the hardest thing to do because just it requires you to stop and think and to think creatively and to make space for that. And that's a very expensive thing to do. And so what Marisol fought for and was able to do was I, as a writing fellow, got a stipend. And it was, I think at the time it was like $800 a month. And for me, as a person who was living in low income housing, that was so huge. It was not only money that I could budget for and depend on, but it was also a good amount of money for me at the time. And then I also got like everything that I made from every specific piece, 100 to however. They don't pay you much. I will say that. And that's another reason why the stipend was important was, you publish an op-ed and you get maybe $150, but I got that on top of the stipend. And I think a lot of organizations won't do that from my experience. So I think treating people, with respect and paying them a decent wage, is something that everyone needs. But when you are asking people to write something for your organization that you're going to maybe use as content, they need to get paid.
That's real. In our last 5 minutes, one of the things I wanted to just ask you is that this is hard. When you have a lived experience, it's trauma. It is, it's stuff that folks don't want to talk about, admit, all the things. And you have definitely, that's the work that you've kind of set out for yourself. And so the question is in two parts. One, why? Do you like put yourself out there all the time to do this work? And then secondly, what's the lesson for us so that we don't turn all of this work we're trying to do with people with lived experience into, peddling trauma and, yeah, I'm gonna stop there.
I actually had a moment. It was, I forget what we called it. It was like a gathering of a lot of organizations whose focus was to lift up stories of people with lived experience. And everybody, I was there with Marisol, and all the organizations brought one of their fellows, and there was just me and this other guy who had lived experience.
And really funny people in the room.
Yeah. And there's this whole group. And so at one point, maybe I can use the word feeding frenzy. It felt kind of like, well, how are we going to get all of these stories out of people? And I got angry and said, do you realize what you are asking people to do? And just saying, like, I wish I could show you right now the comment sections on things that I have written and how scary it has gotten for me. And after that, we had a break for lunch or whatever. And the guy the other man who had lived experience pulled me aside. And he said, they are listening to you. And I said, yeah, and this was like a year before my book came out. And I said, I realize that. I said, it's because I'm a white person. They're listening to me because I'm white. And he said, that doesn't matter. They are listening to you. And if they listen to you, they will listen to other people. You are opening the doors. And that was the most terrifying conversation I've ever had in my entire life. But it showed me why I need to do this. And it is why I do it. And that is what brings me on the stage, is because of that conversation and realizing that I do have a role. And while hoping that by being in this role, I am opening doors for other people to tell their stories. And I forgot the second part of your question.
How? Right? It's more about the, like, what can we do to make sure that people have that we're not in the feeding frenzy? Like, how do we ensure that this is not a feeding frenzy and that we're not
the next one, both of you. The next one.
I think there's a way. I think there's a lot of the exploitation. It's one thing to ask someone to share their story, but it's another so that person feels taken advantage of or used. And I think it's a slippery slope with getting into that. And a lot of it is what the lady said is treating people like human beings and respecting them and compensating them, treating them like a member of the staff if they are writing for you regularly.
Yes.
And
yes.
And I think you gave so much of your heart and time, and it showed. It was an amazing fellowship, and I don't even know how long I was.
It's still going.
It's still going.
I'm not there, and it's still going, which is
like
great.
4 or 5 years, I think. And it was. And I brought all of my friends with me. But it was because of that. And it was because I was compensated and given a stipend, but it was also because of the mentorship and that someone really took the time to not only get to know me, but to tell me that my story is important.
On that note, our time is up. So thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to Stephanie and Marisol for that wonderful conversation. Please welcome the Alliance's Director of Lived Experience and Innovation, Albert Townsend.
How you doing? Hello, everybody. Hello, the National Alliance community. Really appreciate you being here today. So my name is Albert Townsend, and I am the Director of Lived Experience and Innovation here at the National Alliance. I'm so grateful and excited and elated that the Alliance has truly taken on the responsibility to be more intentional about empowering and partnering with the community members who have lived experience. But more so, bringing all communities together to fight the hard fight around ending homelessness in America. And for that, this is really, really an awesome day. So all the lived experience efforts will be centered around housing justice, racial equality, and discrimination, with a narrative shift with building around a sustainable and holistic model with a true lived experience ownership with access, which focuses on supporting your work through capacity building, advocacy, policy, research, media education, and campaigns, and providing a proposal portal for your innovative ideas. The Alliance is here to support your work 100%, helping you develop your work within the awesome infrastructure that already exists, but you will be the creator, the leader, and the guiding force that executes your own work. Right now, right now, as we speak, the National Alliance is gearing up to better understand how to support your work, and all those efforts, I'll make sure that the Alliance becomes quick learners. Diversity, Diversity, equality, and inclusion will be driven throughout this entire process, step by step. Because the sharing meaningful partnerships with those leaders who have lived experience are people with unique perspectives who are driven by their own intuition and driven by their own ability to help their fellow members build collective and individual power by creating sustainable structures that support all of their dreams, all of their desires, and all of their goals, with the manifestation around preventing and ending homelessness. The lived experience work you'll do in partnership with the Alliance will be so innovative that it will initiate new ideas, access trends, creates content, and designs and implements a new direction for the Alliance. All the community work will help the Alliance reevaluate their position on lived experience, as well as contribute to the reorganization around the Alliance strategic plan. We will retool the Consumer Advisory Board and reconvene with the same values and principles around working with people with lived experience, but we will embark on a new culture and a new operational push with a forward-facing approach that will align the Alliance work to speak to your unique perspectives. Here at the Alliance, we want to make sure the possibilities of lived experience work is endless. But with this type of commitment, it takes all hands on deck and a huge investment from everyone. Yeah. Yes. So we hope that you are just as excited as we are about this lived experience movement, because this is a movement, and that you are ready to roll up your sleeves and work with us around preventing and ending homelessness. So listen for some new updates and in the upcoming months around the details around this lived experience partnership. So that was a little bit about the work we're going to do. But so you know where I come from, because I'm standing here talking about work I'm doing, but I wasn't always in this place. I was in a different place at one time, and I'm going to talk a little bit about me. So now I'm a son of a retired factory worker who spent many years working in a factory that showed me the really hard work around commitment, dedication, and loyalty. I'm also a son of a retired elementary school teacher who spent all her life advocating for me so I can be the best that I can be. I'm also the oldest of 3 with 2 younger siblings. I'm also a father. But my family dynamics or linkage for a long time was very sporadic, confusing, disoriented, and abusive. I'm only telling you this because I love them deeply. But it doesn't matter where you come from, how your family is perceived, or what your background is, homelessness found me. Especially because trauma played a big part in my life for a really long time. In 2005, I made my way to DC. And I was hit hard and hit fast around homelessness. And I spent the next 7 years not seeing my family, and it was a very, very difficult time. But even though my family was searching for me, the trauma they caused created scars and isolation that confused me about where I stood with them. So I decided that I would separate myself from them and try to find a different space that accepted me for who I was. But in hindsight, those years of being impacted and unsheltered, which still leaves all the bruises, the scrapes, and the wounds that come with spending a lot of your life in the streets, in shelters, living in my car, and roaming in places I didn't have no business. At my very moment, and under that despair, I wanted to lean into them because I really miss that unity and I really miss those connections. But what I understood clearly is that there's other people out there in the streets who don't have nobody. There's other people that need to be cared for. And there's other people that need to be nurtured. And other people that just want call a place where they can feel like they belong. But more importantly, that they want their independence. And they want to make sure that, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making the wrong decision about reconnecting. So around 2008, I realized that my way of thinking and my actions was leading me to a state of impacting this continuously. And dealing with this on my own terms wasn't working because I was full-blown homeless at that time. I was dealing with some stuff that was so that was really, really so difficult to deal with, but I should have combated it and confronted it right away, but I didn't. But at the same time, I started to receive some signs, and those signs would come numerously. And they would come at times when I was making a transition. But now, no matter my situation and no matter my circumstances, when I receive those signs, I make sure that I'm listening closely to those signs. So those signs I heard was everything was going to be okay. But because this journey you need to embrace because it's important and you need to learn from it. The second sign I heard was your past and your current situation or status don't define you, so push on. And the third sign I heard was help is on the way, but you need to reach out to it. And the fifth sign I heard was your life has meaning and purpose, but you have to walk and talk in it. And the last sign I heard was when you get blessed, make sure you bless everybody around you. These signs for me comes very naturally. They are only inspired when I'm connected to genuine relationships. That helps me bridge the gaps around who my true support system is, what my ecosystem is, what is my learning plan, what are my principles and compassion, and who I can confide in when things get really, really hard. Since I've started to listen to my inner voice, my lived experience has taken me to a new height. I spent the last 15 years advocating for others. What I didn't realize is that my lived experience would lead me to 5 years of working within systems change. And another 9 years working within the service divider world. And then being hired by those same organizations to do consulting work. Who would ever figure that? And I'm standing here today as a director of lived experience for the Alliance, and I'm excited about it. So my lived expertise is tremendous, and so is yours. But I searched long and hard to find those relationships that help me hear my inner voice. And without that inner voice, I probably would never ever discover what my true purpose is. We are embarking on this new adventure. So be looking for your inner voice so we can support and lift up that voice for you. We want to thank you all today. And I want to thank specifically my DC family, my Maryland and Virginia family, because they supported me through all my really difficult times. And I'm gonna come down and personally thank you. But I also want to thank those unfamiliar faces that I seen this last couple of days who we had really strong engagement and conversation. So thank you as well. So if you're looking for a strong, committed family, the Alliance is here for you. So my name is Albert. I'm excited to work with you and build this partnership here at the Alliance, and we'll be connecting with you soon. So thank you. Yes. So I have some closing announcements. The first announcement is don't forget that the karaoke jumps off in here. The karaoke jumps off in here, I think around 6 o'clock is the karaoke. So don't forget about the karaoke. And also, is everybody ready to eat? Is everybody ready to eat? Thank you so much. We appreciate you.